Hey there everyone, this is AJ for the Mighty Gluestick channel. Time for a patron requested video on the Red Wizards of Thay. So I thought I would explore Thay with you and let you know why this is such a great location on the continent of Faerun, one of my favourites. There is something very wrong in Thay. You can feel it in the air, the ground, and every living thing. Something evil taints this land. No matter how much finery you build and heap upon it, something evil lingers and taints everything. There are other places like this on the world of Toril. The ancient land of Narfell has similar feels, something that we of Earth would hardly have any time or words to describe, just a sense of wrongness. The land itself is an impressive series of rising plateaus. It is a warm climate, not as lush as the forests of Cormyr or as dry as the Badlands of Anarok. The plants that grow here are hardy, tough, and tend to thrive in poor soil. Thayans grow vast fields of grain here, but it is the fragrant herbs and sun-loving berries, tomatoes, bitter fruits, citrus and stone fruits, date palms, sandalwood, tangled in old trees that have valuable gums, frankincense and myrrh, hardwoods that give Thay such an exotic feeling. This is truly a gateway to the Far East, the last bastion before the daunting grasslands vastness of the barbaric hordelands. Thay has an impressive output of produce of all kinds, fueled of course by an abundance of slaves. This is a land of stark divides in social status, a rigid hierarchy, and a brutal place for those of low station. Every inch of this land that is not personally owned by a ranking red wizard is cultivated, maintained, and shaped in some way by the population. The huge plateau that rises above the surrounding countryside has a climate controlled by magical incantation. It is also so heavily protected against divination and scrying magic that the network of spell power rivals the ancient elven mythals. It is this impenetrable screen of magic that drives so many rival powers to send their agents into the lands of Thay to report back on what they discover there. Of course, you're about to go on a journey of discovery that nobody in the current environment of Faerun could even dream of. But to understand this place, we need to go back in time. The most ancient human empire was Imaskar. This empire was centered in what is now the Mulhorand desert. Its borders were vast, stretching from the endless wastes of the Golden Water from the Alambus Sea to the very frontiers of Tyraturos. It grew from the local tribes into a true empire, and Imaskar was the first overpowering human empire, predating even Netheril. It was responsible for the creation of the oldest empires still in existence, the ancient empires of Mulhorand, Unther, and Jacinta. At one point, a series of plagues devastated the population of Imaskar, and the wizards' rulers opened portals to distant realm, called Earth. They opened one portal into the ancient Middle East and took a large number of slaves. This is the basis of the Mulhorandi culture. They opened a second portal and took a large number of slaves from ancient Mesopotamia. This became Unther culture. The blending of these human races, displaced in time and space, are what is now known as the Mulan race of humans on the world of Toril. Mulan are typically tall and thin, with a sallow skin tone and brown or hazel eyes. They don't have a lot of body hair, and those of high status have always kept their hair either short or shaved. In the past, they favoured simple, unadorned clothing, as ostentation was seen as an affront to the beauty of the gods. Their religion set them apart from the ancient godless Imaskari, and it was their gods that were largely responsible for their eventual liberation and the fall of the Imaskari Empire. And what an empire it was. The Imaskari were the first astronomers, the first to give names to planets. Their artificer kings had tremendous power and respect. Their knowledge was vast, their cities were marvels, and then, in minus 2488 Dale wrecking, the Mulan rose up. Their incarnate gods battled the artificer kings, and the empire was torn apart. Tens of millions died. The land became the Mulhorand desert, and the surviving liberated peoples slowly founded their own civilizations. Now, we fast forward in time. Here we are, it's still 2,575 years in the past. These are the last days of what came to be known as the Old Empires, or sometimes the Old Kingdoms of Jacinta, Mulhorand, and Unther. In minus 1081 DR, the theurgist and adept Thayd, last apprentice of the Imaskari wizards, prepared a site on the mountain peaks of the rising plateaus in the land which would one day bear his name. There he opened a fateful portal to a brutal world dominated by empires of fanatically religious orcs. He made the most of the situation. He had plans in mind, so he went down off the mountains and set about putting his events in motion. After inciting the wizards of Mulhorand and Unther into rebellion, however, he was executed, leaving no one in Faerun with knowledge of the existence of the Orc Gate portal he had created. For 5 years the portal remained dormant until suddenly the orcs began pouring through, eventually laying siege to both Mulhorand and Unther for 6 years. Sounds like a rip-off of World of Warcraft, but actually this story predates the invasion of the orcs of Athos by quite a bit. More fanatical than those of the north, these invading grey orcs and their clerics had developed amazingly powerful and deadly spells, the most potent of magics being their ability to directly call down avatars of their deities. Avatars of the gods of Mulhorand and Unther also dwelt on Faerun, but were weakened after the overthrow and destruction of the Imaskar Empire, and they were just not prepared to defend against this incredible orc horde, the likes of which Tyraturos has never seen before, and probably will never see again. The Mulhorandi were forced to recruit mercenaries to help them quench the orc hordes and take the fight to the land that would be called Thay. Basically, this is like the great battle of the first armies of men and elves and dwarves against the orc hordes of Sauron, and Thay was Mordor, essentially. Mercenary warriors of the tribes of Gnar, Rashimi and Sosrim swelled the ranks of the mighty human forces, and it was touch and go. But the war took a decisive turning point in the Battle of the Gods, when most of the gods of Mulhorand and Untheric pantheons were killed, and in the process broke the back of the orc forces, leading them to eventually being routed by the remnants of the Mulhorandi and Untheric pantheons after a rallying in minus 1069 DR. After the end of this great war, the mercenary forces disbanded and went on to form the civilizations of Vasa, Damara and Narfell, among others. It was a time of heroes, gods, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. There were no people on the continent of Faerun who were not touched in some way by these events, and when dealing with truly ancient beings like Karatura mortals, ancient dragons, devils, Fey lords and the like, these events are still part of the very, very long memories of these beings. Few records of the specific events remain in the archives of most human nations though, but these events are still remembered. On the mountain peaks of Thay, known today as Thaymount, the orcs built around an already existing ancient fortress, carved into the side of the highest peaks. This structure is said to have been built by a long-lost intelligent race of lizard folk, and is called the Citadel. In present-day Thay, Thaymount is home to Szass Tam, and is the seat of his power, with the Citadel being ostensibly his capital of Thay. But contrary to what many outsiders might think, Thay is not as organised and poised to invade its neighbours as rumours have it. The reality of Thay is that it is a land divided and largely concerned with its own internal politics. So let's take a look at modern Thay, its people, culture, geography, strengths and weaknesses. And this will differ from a lot of the lore that you find on the internet at the moment because some of it is quite dated. Thay was founded by wizards, while not having exactly always been ruled by wizards. Since around 1030 DR, the Year of Warlords, the Zalkirs, or the leaders of each school of magic in Thay, have been the established rulers of Thay. So it is a true magocracy, similar in many ways to the ancient empires of Netheril. The mages of Thay are highly organised, but much about them has changed, and since 1479 DR, few individuals associate the name Red Wizards with Thay at all, but instead with a loose confederacy of merchant arcanists, and this is actually quite true. Many traditions of the old Red Wizards are now lost, thanks to a series of events where the Lich Szass Tam executed a coup, overthrew the old egalitarian governance of the 8 Zalkirs, and instigated a civil war of sorts. The rule of this lich tainted the Red Wizards and necromancy became far more prevalent, but this never sat well with the general middle class of the region, obviously. Those who served the Red Wizards ran merchant houses, ran guilds, and of course the slave trade, which could only see undead servants as a dire threat to their livelihood and traditions. The defeat of Zalkirs Szass Tam, to defeat them, Szass Tam used the spell plague to devastate the land, ending the civil war through an event of even greater disaster. The rebel Zolkirs were driven from Thay, became outlaws, exiles, as were their followers, but the Red Wizards' dark plots came back to haunt them, and many of the Order's enemies took the opportunity caused by the upheaval to assault the many enclaves the Red Wizards had spread throughout the world. These once more held far more sinister purposes than they do today. In fact, it was this great uprising against them and this common conception that Red Wizards were evil, which caused the populace to reconsider their ways. Despite the general distrust and dislike that most feel toward them, the mages are able to extend their power to almost every corner of the realms, running their enclaves, and from these they run an extremely lucrative trade in magical items, spells and artifacts, making them virtually indispensable to many of their clients. And as such, the wizards expand their sphere of influence ever further. Spending so much time engaged in business with foreign nations for so many years now has created a far more cosmopolitan social group. Modern Red Wizards don't maintain the same Milani traditions of shaved heads and tattoos that the old organisations did, for the most part. Most of the Red Wizards are actual wizards, but not all are. And the title of Red Wizard is generally inherited from parent to child, with exception in the case of adoption or marriage, whereas in the past the Red Wizards were recruited from talented wizards only. Red Wizards' enclaves are essentially self-run, and some by a single individual, others by a small council of wizards. Most of these enclaves are found within the lands bordering the Sea of the Fallen Stars. Those nations where Red Wizards are found almost certainly have an enclave within their capital city. Basically an embassy, but it's a trade embassy, a warehouse, a staging point. As for Szass Tam, the last remaining Zolkirs united against him to prevent a ritual that would have transformed him into a being of godlike power, similar to the accursed Kyas. Their efforts cost them their lives, but likely saved Faerun from one of the greatest threats it might ever have faced, and prevented Szass Tam from ever attempting the ritual again, at least so long as he is conducting it on Thayan soil, which he doesn't often leave Thay at all, so that put a kibosh on his plans. For the Red Wizards, however, the death of the Zolkirs ended what the Red Wizards once were, the death of their traditions. This is not to say that Thay is now all sunshine and happiness. Far from it. Given a chance, the wizards would unite to destroy the witches of Rashemen, the Seven Sisters and their allies, the Harpers, and even the Zentarum. They would most happily invade Aglarond, Rashemen, Mulhorand, Unther, and many other nations. As far as the average Thayan is concerned, they have a right to rule. Their way of doing things is just the way things are. Anyone who thinks differently is just an ignorant foreigner. First of all, they are widely despised for having a thriving slave trade. However, you don't see Thayan forces out and about actively taking captives for this trade. The great majority of this flow of people comes from other groups and nations selling them to Thay. So, from the rather cool and cruel perspective of the Thayans, anyone who blames Thay for slavery is ignorant of how widespread it truly is, and had best look to their own lands to see the truth of the matter. Thayans don't display a lot of emotions. They are reserved and almost never get involved in fun and games. They do, however, love to watch such things. They will enjoy a fine meal with friends as slaves and artisans dance for them. They go to performances of farce and comedy, satire, and they read poetry, listen to music, love fine art, and the very best foods. The roaring trade in magic items, the spell magic trade, ancient Imaskar artifice, alchemy, their enormous production of grains and exotic spices, rare fruits, and the kind of mass production of fabrics and other labour-intensive industry that slavery really benefits, means that they are very wealthy as a culture. They live extravagantly. This also plays a huge part in their national politics, which is best described as fractious. When the Zolkirs lived, they basically controlled local politics, but by their influence over the Tharchians. They understood modern Thay, and to understand it, you have to have an understanding of the different Tharchs, or districts of the whole region, because each has a different culture to it. It has its own local governor, or Tharchian, who rules over the local civil structure. So let's go over the different Tharchs of Thay and their Tharchians. Thaymount doesn't currently have a Tharchian, and since it's been 109 years since the last Tharchian, Dimitra Flass, was assassinated by a servant of Szass Tam, the This whole area is off limits to pretty much anyone who is not a red wizard anyway. Most of the day-to-day running of the place is performed by apprentice wizards and serving staff who live on the Thaymount full-time. This is a pretty amazing place. I mean, it puts Hogwarts to shame. Dominated by the landscape of high mountains, active volcanism, including ancient volcanic forges, soot-covered ice slopes and glaciers, wondrous and very old fortresses, towers and subterranean complexes, gold mines, academy castles, all sorts of magical wonders, monstrous armies, devils in servitude, dragons, who knows what else. The majority of the rivers of Thay mostly originate from the Thaymount and the alpine meltwater of the glaciers. So, pretty nice. Those who approach Thay from the Sea of Fallen Stars will dock in the Tharch of Priador. Again, this Tharch has no Tharchian since Anzar Thrall was murdered in 1375 DR, and thanks to his despotic rule of terror, the local population is none too keen to see a return to the bad old days. The metropolis of Benzatur, the largest city, is vital to the extremely prosperous sea trade here, shipping millions of tons of goods every year. It's also a centre of religious worship in Thay, with temples to every deity except, traditionally, Azuth and Mistra, because the red wizards find them offensive. One of the largest, most well-organised thieves guilds on the continent of Faerun operates here. It would be safe to say that, to some extent, the Thieves Guild is kind of the proxy Tharchian for the region, as little gets done without some form of corruption that feeds into the underground economy. In case of emergency in Priador, do not call for the local guards, just hold up a full coin purse and wait a moment to catch the attention of the thieves operating that street, dock or plaza, and then when approached, ask how much it will cost for them to help you. Alaor is the island just off the coast of Priador, ruled by Tharchian Thessalonikanos, a very tall Mulan woman with aquatic-themed tattoos, scale armour, ornaments of coral, and a trident for her favoured weapon. Thessaloniki is considered one of the most capable commanders in Thay, and the two islands of Alaor house the largest naval base. Most of the 30,000 people who live there are in some way connected to the base and its services, manufacturing ships and things, which actually makes it one of the most secure Tharchs in Thay. The facilities are fairly modern as well, since it was rebuilt after salamanders from the Plane of Fire immolated the islands after a pact with them went belly up, and they had to call on the power of Kasuth to put a stop to the destruction, which is why Kasuth is a very strong clergy in Thay to this day, particularly in one of the provinces. In the north and west, Thazalhar, the smallest land-based Tharch, is nestled between the river Tazarim in Thay and the River of the Dawn, which marks the border of Mulhorand. It is also separated from the Endless Waste by the Sunrise Mountains. Formerly ruled by a Tharchian, Milsantos Daramos, until his death of old age, an impressive feat for one in his position, I can tell you, in 1382 DR. It's a small and very sparsely populated, the only residents of note being the border patrol troops who are stationed there, demanding tribute from merchant caravans passing through. Very enterprising merchant caravans. It's much more common for trade to travel across the sea. Some bandits and some pirate families who live on the tiny stretch of Thazalhar's coastline. The area was once rich farmland, but when Yorg Macdon summoned the abyssal lord Eltab in 922 DR, the area was turned into one giant graveyard, and not a soul has tilled this land for food since then. At night, this Tharch is populated more by the wandering dead than it is by living people, including many whites for whom the war with Mulhorand has never ended. Eltab is quite an important figure in Thay, so we shall skip over the various Tharches to Eltabbar. Again, this is without a Tharchian since the murder of Dimitra Flass in 1385 DR. Eltabbar was formerly the capital of Thay, a metropolis of 124,000 people. Fairly huge slave population, is really the driving force and now the centre of foreign commerce. There are numerous slave markets as well as a constant stream of caravans going to and from. And a lot of people's first sight of Thay, if they're travelling by land, is the Tharch and the city of Eltabbar. Also of note is the unusual design of the city, with special waterways that are constructed as part of a spell to keep Eltab imprisoned. The abyssal lord Eltab was a potent force in the abyss, rivaling the powers of Grast, Orcus, and even Demogorgon himself. However, during the ancient days of Faerun, the empires of Narfell and Ruamathar engaged in a bitter war, which ultimately destroyed both empires. During this war, Eltab was summoned to Faerun by powerful mages of Narfell, so he could be used as a pawn against their hated enemy. Eltab led an abyssal horde on the behalf of Narfell and invaded Ruamathan, the city of Rashemen, which he quickly conquered and set himself up as the ruler. Eltab's rule was brief and horrible, as an alliance of spellcasters, including the witches of Rashemen, overthrew Eltab. Eltab was forced to flee, but the Rashemi witches caught up with him in the Shara Wood, imprisoning him beneath the ground and bound Dracolich, called the Everlasting Worm, to guard over him. 100 years or so later, followers of the dark god Merkel, intending to plunder the hoard of the Everlasting Worm, discovered Eltab. They agreed to release him under the condition that he serve Merkel's church for 99 years. And Eltab agreed, and with his aid the followers of Merkel took control of the city of Shandollar, and in its place established the theocratic city of Eltabranar. Later, Eltab prompted an ill-fated invasion of the nations of Unther and Mulhorand. Eltab was once again imprisoned, this time by the god kings who led Mulhorand, in an extra-dimensional planar cyst beneath Thaymount. The infamous Red Wizards found Eltab more than 700 years later. The wizards used an ancient Narfell ritual to call Eltab forth to assist them in their war with the Mulhorandi god kings. The god kings' armies were routed, and the nation of Thay was established. When the Red Wizards found they could not dismiss Eltab, they imprisoned him again near the mouth of the river that is now named after the demon lord, and built Eltabbar over the prison. More recent, Eltabbar was part of the prison. The waterways form part of the enchantment. More recently, the Thayan lich Szass Tam realised that Eltab would soon break out of his prison, no matter what they did. He deliberately released Eltab with the intention of using a spell to permanently enslave him. But his plan was foiled by a group of adventurers, allowing Eltab to escape into the demon cyst below Thaymount. I could just imagine Szass Tam. I would have done it too if it wasn't for you pesky mortals. During a retaliation confrontation with Szass Tam, Eltab was seemingly destroyed, but thanks to the binding cast on him by the ancient Narfelli wizards, he was magically transported to the citadel of conjurers in the nation of Impultur, where he is currently plotting new plans for conquest and revenge. Just can't get rid of the guy. Having been imprisoned in Thay for so long, the corruptive influence of the Abyss has seeped into the land, and to this day things come crawling out of the depths every now and then, so best to keep on your toes. Lapendrar, ruled by Tharchian Iseldra Yeth after the War of the Zolkirs, Iseldra is also a red wizard and a vampire. She is a follower of Szass Tam that was appointed as Tharchian of Lapendrar in 1387 DR, and was still Tharchian at the time of the Tyranny of Dragons, a century later. She remembered well the War of the Zolkirs, and to avoid a return to that time, she actively hunted down and executed many exiled red wizards. Lapendrar is the most independent of Tharchs of Thay. The city of Amruthar is a thriving metropolis of 42,000 people. The presence of the Red Wizards is quite slim here, and there is usually a vocal group who want to sever all ties with Thay, become fully independent, and perhaps ally themselves with Aglarond. However, this is an unrealistic proposition, as Aglarond is simply too far away, and any move to sever ties with Thay would simply see the whole Tharch annexed with a quite intimidating display of force, as the noble houses and enclaves of Thay would send in their private military units to secure the holdings and any facilities that Thay puts any value in. Nobody really wants a few thousand griffin-mounted war wizards, a horde of undead led by vampire commanders, or legions of veteran mercenaries pouring into the city and declaring martial law. For a long time, a simple reminder of Thayan dominance has been a garrison force of gnolls, who are often sent out on closely supervised patrols. Lapendrar produces a lot of the fine paper and silks of Thay, as well as marsh oysters, river fish, crab meat, bamboo, and long-grain rice, originally imported from Karatua. You can find quite a few of the more civilized lizard folk who work as slave overseers in the marshes, river flats, and rice paddies, fending off the occasional raid from the sneaky bullywugs. Surthay, ruled by Tharchian Homin Odessiron, a dour-faced war mage who takes his role as of Tharchian quite seriously. He's proud of his Tharch, despite it being something of a dung heap. The capital, also called Surthay, lies outside of the enchantments that manage the climate in central Thay. So the weather is colder and rainier than in the central regions. Basically gets the dumpings of rain over the Sunrise Mountains. It thus has an exaggerated reputation as being perpetually rainy, dirty and unpleasant. The town is set in Lake Mulcenter and is a very crude place with rutted, dung-littered streets, simple wooden houses and thatch-roofed shacks. The lack of interest by Thayan nobles in anything Surthay has to offer it certainly has a crippling effect on its standard of living, which only reinforces the problem and leads to the Thayans of Surthay being a pretty foul-tempered class of people within Thay, often blamed for thefts, petty crimes and what have you. Basically they're the Thayan Hicks. So Thayans understandably flock to a lifestyle of travel and trade outside of Thay. The distrust of foreigners is no less troublesome for them than the lack of respect they get at home, and they're actually pretty hard-working people. Gauros, ruled by Tharchian Aesir Kren, another warlord. She wears a blue enamel plate over her lean frame. Gauros is the front line in the constant tensions between Thay and Rashaman, with localized conflicts often erupting over the rights to mine the rich minerals in this area. Aesir she hates the Rashimi people, their entire country, and would love to go with war with them in earnest, but is strongly pressured to maintain a truce by Szass Tam, who is in favour of Thay achieving its goals by trade rather than conquest, at least for the time being. He's seeing how this plays out. Pyrados, ruled by Tharchian Nimia Fukar, the name of the Tharch and the city is Pyrados. There's 55,000 people who live there. The mountains of this area are rich in mineral mines. This is one of the more lawless Tharches. The ruling elite are only interested in mining and manufacturing trades. Anything that doesn't impact on that is left for street justice to sort out. As a result, the locals are quick to take matters into their own hands, and the streets are occasionally impassable due to a full-on skirmish going on between opposing groups, fully intent on murdering each other. The most adventurous Thayans come from Pyrados, where the lure of the Sunset Mountains calls to them every morning as the sun rises over their impressive peaks. Adventurers from distant lands are also fairly welcome here, with many places offering accommodation outside of the city walls. Tyraturos has no Tharchian since Daimon was killed by devils sent in 1385 DR by Nevron, the Zulkir of Conjuration. The two main roads into Thay pass through this Tharch, which is heavily patrolled and protected. The sprawling metropolis of Tyraturos has a population of 65,000 and boasts the largest, most profitable arenas for the slave trade. All manner of creatures can be bought here and sold here, including drow, lamia and centaurs, riding beasts such as griffins, pegasi and drakes. You never know what you'll find, including your own sorry self clapped in iron shackles and waking up on a slave barge if you're not too careful. Delhumide, ruled by Tharchian Invari Metron, is another blighted and devastated region. 2,300 years ago, when the Thay had been a Mulhorandi colony, Delhumide was one of its greatest cities and bastions of power. When the Red Wizards rebelled, they destroyed this town, kind of like sent a huge message, using the darkest sort of sorcery to accomplish this task. Now the ground where the city's ruin still stands is accursed and unclean. Foul beasts of the lower plains linger and prowl here. The air is redolent with corruption, and a man could suffer from madness or leprosy just by venturing into the places the ancient defenders fortified against the terrible Thayan offensive. Shattered buildings, blasted and melted walls, twisted minarets and toppled towers can be seen through, though many of the buildings remain essentially intact, kind of disturbingly so. Delhumide has long been considered a land fit only for the housing of slaves. Nobody else other than fools and adventurers would go there willingly. The Tharchian has long sought to improve the Tharch's prospects by manufacturing magic items and dangerous concoctions that are less beneficial to the environment. So the least environmentally friendly industry is here done in Delhumide. Palls of smog, toxic pools, mutated beasts and worse are part of the miserable conditions the unfortunate slaves have to deal with if they're unlucky enough to get housed here. So the Mulan people, for thousands of years, associated the length of their hair with the social status. The more noble and powerful, the more privileged you are, the less hair you have on display. The Red Wizards typically removed every trace of hair, even eyelashes, and adorned their skin with tattoos. These have their own magical potency, so it's not just a mark of rank or achievements and decorations. These tattoos could store spells for instantaneous use by wizards in an emergency, and often resulted in red wizards beating other foreign wizards hands down in a magical quick-draw duel. Red wizards have always been extremely focused on arcane power. They are matched in this intensity only by the self-sacrificing hobgoblin battle mages who put themselves through extraordinary physical and mental duress to achieve more potent and destructive results. Thayan red wizards completely abandon a whole school of magic in order to focus more on their efforts in a single school that they gain total mastery over. This over-specialisation gives them quite a martial advantage, but those who devote themselves to less combat-oriented schools are also punching well above their weight. But, like the ancient Netherese Empire, they don't believe there is any limit to the potential of the human archmage, nor is any route to power a taboo that they need to kowtow to. The Red Wizards of old made pacts with foul beings, experimented with producing monstrous armies, tortured other mages to extract their secrets, murdered, assassinated, spied, and resorted to the worst rituals of necromancy to embrace an accursed existence of undeath. Nobody in Thay wears red unless they are a red wizard. This is both a sign of respect and a punishable offence in all of the Tharchs. Slaves are not permitted to cut their own hair. Their owners may have it cut for them though, particularly if the slave has been marked with a tattoo or brand of ownership, so even with short hair they're recognised as being slaves. The fear of the noble classes, and even the thriving populations of free Thayan merchants, artisans, civil servants and the faculty of the Red Wizard enclaves, is that there must eventually be a mass uprising of the huge slave population. We've seen this before in other empires. So they ensure that their slaves are not gathered in groups of people from the same original location. They break up families, look for signs of friendship between slaves and put a stop to it. They do everything to ensure the slaves feel isolated. Rebellion begins with collusion. Loose lips sink ships, such is the motto of the Thayan slave overseer. The nobility barely has anything to do with the slaves, though. They have other servants, freemen, to do all of that unpleasant whipping and so on. They live in clean and elegant villas, built to take advantage of Thay's magically controlled, ever-pleasant environment. They always have a plentiful supply of superb breads and baked confections, fresh and dried fruits. They burn fragrant incense and enjoy sitting in divans or piles of gorgeous silk cushions, socially gathering. Commonly, they will sit around large platters of food that are laid out on low tables, and everyone sits and talks for hours, drinking superb wines made from local Thayan vineyards. Magic items, alchemical concoctions, artifacts, and wondrous items are almost commonplace in the enclaves, towers, and compounds and the villas of the Thayans. Even the middle-class free Thayans usually have a few choice items on their person used for day-to-day practical matters. Being a centre of continental-wide commerce, there is little you cannot find in the thriving markets of Thay. The streets of Eltabbar in the evening are warm and bustling. Vendors sell foods of 100 different nations. You can buy all manner of goods, indulge almost any form of vice. But of course, you may also be accosted in any number of small and narrow alleyways and clouted over the back of the head only to wake up to a new life as a slave. Best keep your wits about you when carousing in Thay. But all in all, Thay is actually far more open to foreign visitors than the gossips and propaganda would have you believe. The accents of the people of Thay are now more varied, thanks to many living for many years in other nations, but the traditional accent is closest to Egyptian and Syrian for the free Thayans, and Lebanese for the nobility. But remember that a Thayan is expressive with their hands, not their face. They rarely smile or outwardly display emotions. The manner of speech of Thayans is all the expression they need. They can load a lot of nuance into any sentence just with the way they choose their words. They can also sling some incredible insults without ever resorting to any sort of profanity. But if things do turn violent, the very least you can expect is a dagger suddenly coming at you. But beware of the vengeance of a furious Thayan, because they are a people with a long and rich tradition of murdering people in their sleep. Thayans are reserved, proud, confident. They occasionally complain bitterly about the terrible living conditions in foreign nations, and are pretty miserly with their compliments. However, they do have an ancient tradition of hospitality, and will occasionally prefer to discuss important business matters over a lavish banquet meal. They enjoy drinking fine red wines, tea and spicy stews served with mashed grains and fresh bread. The bread you can get in Thay actually is the best in Faerun. Even the halflings of Lurin cannot boast better loaves. Thayans are wealthy. They are ostentatiously wealthy. For them, spending hundreds and hundreds of gold on a lavish meal for their friends is nothing. It's commonplace. I have included below a link to a short video of a guy talking in stereotypical accents. If you want to have fun with the idea of different cultures in Faerun having distinct accents your players can come to recognise and associate with the game world, I find that voice acting is a powerful tool for creating memorable characters and deeply immersive narrative. You don't have to be good at it, just practice makes perfect. I hope you enjoyed this deep exploration of the lands of Thay. If you did, please click the like button. Tell me what you liked the most so I can improve in my next exploration video. Give me some suggestions of where to go next. Feel free to add additional lore for others to learn, and please do subscribe, share, and tell your friends where you found this video. Subscribers, please check into the community tab. I frequently post polls asking for views on things and talk about the process behind the vids, my gaming life, and interesting or useful material I find online. Those of you so inclined, there is a link to my Patreon page where I post the full scripts for all the videos I produce. The minimum donation of $1 per month is all that's required to unlock that for you, for those who prefer to absorb information via text. But if you simply want to support me with a complimentary tip, I have included my PayPal link in the doobly-doo below. Thank you for listening, happy gaming, and I shall be back again soon with more easy listening lore for the world's most popular role-playing game.